Welcome to Natural Habitat Adventures Daily Dose of Nature. Today's presentation, Mirrorless Landscape Photography 101 with OM System, is brought to you by OM System's Technical Account Manager, Mike Amico. Thank you for being here today, Mike. Over to
Sure.
you.
Great. Thank you, Brooke. I appreciate it. And welcome, everybody. And thanks for joining me for this presentation on what I call the mirrorless landscape and stepping into landscape photography. And we'll answer some questions at the end. And I just want to mention that any registered guests for NatHab for any of their excursions are able to actually access a 10% off of OM system gear in your guest portal. So it's a great thing to do, and hopefully you'll learn something about the product here as well as some landscape photography. My goal is that you leave with just a couple of nuggets. I'm new at landscape as well. I'm always learning, and I want to give you some tips here mostly, and they'll work with pretty much any camera. So the idea is to just have you leave and go, I didn't think about that before, and then I feel like I did my job. So welcome everybody. My name is Mike Amico, and I'm a technical account manager with OM System. I started with Olympus and shifted over to OM, of course, about almost 11 years ago. It's been about 10 and a half years, but I started in the industry about 20 years ago. So actually 25 years ago. Oh, God. Okay. 25 years ago with a little company called Minolta, and went on from there. And I was with Panasonic when 4/3 was introduced. So I've been a micro 4/3 guy for a long time. I enjoy all cameras actually. And currently this is what I do. And I love these cameras because they're like little toys. They have a lot of computational features that you'll see some of these in this presentation, and they're just a lot of fun. And I found that in the last 10 years or so, my photography has gotten better because I want to shoot my camera. And that's a big thing. I think any camera right now today from any manufacturer is absolutely fantastic. You just can't get a bad camera. And it's a matter of what feels good in your hand and what you really want to take with you. And that's what keeps that art of photography going, right? And so these cameras are great for everything from travel to landscape to birding to macro to just that weather resistance, and we'll go into all that. So let's go ahead and get started. And today we're going to go through a few things here with the mirrorless landscape. We'll talk about some of the OM system advantages and a little bit of a gear overview. I have to do my commercial. That's the advantages there. We have 15 landscape photography tips. And this is where I hope to really get you to think about your landscape a little bit. And then I have some helpful settings and features that might get you started on your journey as well. Things you might not think about there when you're out there. So let's go ahead and get started with some advantages here. So first up, I just want to mention that I always encourage people to print. And I do this because I see a lot of people nowadays that get into the art of photography, and we enjoy these programs we have. We have great software. We love to blow everything up, and we love to, complain about things like noise or this or dynamic range or that, but we don't print. And printing is another part of the industry that has come a long way. You can print on anything from metal to wood to traditional print. And it's amazing to hold a print in your hand. It's your final image, and there's nothing like it in the world. So don't be afraid to print big. Again, it's a whole different industry than it was. It's grown just like our cameras have, and there's nothing like having a print in your hand. Give it to a friend, sell it, put it on a cafe wall, but definitely print your images. On the left is a print from my friend Joe Brady. A nice panorama he did on Fuji Flex paper, and on the right is a picture I did a while back at the camera shops up in Michigan. So just a fun thing to do. Definitely print your images. All right, let's talk about OM system and some of the benefits of our cameras. So these are micro 4/3 cameras. Their center is about half the size of a 35 millimeter, or what the industry has coined full frame. And so because of that, we're able to make the lenses a lot smaller, especially when you're talking with things like wildlife and birding and things of that nature. We've always been, like to call ourselves compact and powerful. That's really kind of the phrase we like to coin, being smaller and lighter in the field, especially for things like, photographing birds and landscapes and wildlife and macro. The reach of the format, because you get that 2x crop factor, makes it a lot easier to carry a smaller, lighter kit, and you get a lot of reach out of it. You got great telemacro and macro capabilities, and you can get more flexibility, a little more energy when you're in the field. As we all know, ounces become pounds when we're in the field. So this lets you react a little bit more quickly, and you can also enjoy your photography a little more. I mean, there's nothing like walking around with my 150 to 400 and enjoying nature and then spinning that camera right around my back and just enjoying the birds, and then pulling it back around and photographing, not having to worry about a tripod or anything like that. So it's a really fun kit. Great kit as well for a secondary kit. If you have a larger sensor camera at home and you like to travel around the world, especially with like NatHab, it's great to have a kit that you can throw in a backpack and bring with you as a secondary kit for travel. And the system works very, very well. It's really amazing. And like I said, carrying lighter gear really gives you that energy, more flexibility, more ways to express yourself, and lets you react a lot more quickly to the scene. The 4/3 cameras have, they're feature rich, but one of the things they have that we sometimes forget to talk about is a supersonic wave filter. So Olympus was the first company that has this supersonic wave filter. And what it does is it allows the dust to just blow off the camera. When you turn the camera on, it actually shakes the sensor 30,000 times, knocking the dust off. And it was actually improved around 2019 with a coating, an anti-stick coating, anti-static coating over the front of it. So this is on all the cameras, and it works really, really well. And you rarely see one of our cameras go in for a sensor cleaning because of it. So it's very cool. And I wanted to share this because I think it's a really fun slide. It's some fun facts about the supersonic wave filter. And it shows you the force of this wave filter and how it affects the dust. So 1 G is the force of a human standing, and 3 Gs is the force of the space shuttle during ascent. 5 Gs is a roller coaster during drops or turns, and 6 Gs is an Indy Formula One car. 10 Gs, Red Bull Air Race plane, but several 1,000 Gs is the supersonic wave filter. Isn't that great? I had to share that. I think that's a fun little slide. So one of the cool things also about the sensor is that you have almost half the focusing distance when you compare to lenses with a similar focal length. So it's great for macro. You have a more greater depth of field. So a little more clarity, a little more detail in those close-up shots. When you do macro, you're getting close to the subject and you're throwing that background out a lot. And so you really want more depth of field. And with 4/3, you do get that. So it becomes a great category for that. And lenses like our 90mm macro are very unique in the industry, being that you're a 2-to-1 out of the box, and with a 2x converter, you're a 4-to-1, and that's an 8-to-1 full frame equivalent, handheld, with 7 stops of image stabilizer. So you can shoot spiders and bugs handheld that close. It's pretty cool. Here's a picture of that 90 right there, which would be a 180 equivalent. And that's Chris McGinnis in Costa Rica shooting that in the rain. So the weather sealing in these cameras is like second to none. It's something that we pride ourselves upon. We actually have them IP rated, which is ingress protection. You can go on their website, and they do ratings for a lot of different products. And a lot of the lenses are IPX1, and the bodies are IP53, as well as the pro lenses. And that's a dust and water rating. So these are truly weather sealed construction for splash proof, dust proof, freeze proof performance that gets you through anything. You can literally put these in the shower. So it's really nice to not have to put a raincoat or an umbrella over your camera when you're out there shooting and it starts to rain or snow. This was me in Daytona when the EM1X came out a few years ago, and it started pouring, and I got out there and still shot in the rain. And it's cool because when you shoot in the rain, you do get some really cool saturated colors and stuff, and you get some really neat stuff when you're out there when you don't have to worry about just putting the camera away or covering it up. You can really get some neat stuff, and this is some examples of some of my images that I've gotten doing that. That was the shot I got when it was raining that day at Daytona. So not thinking about a car coming off the track, but thinking about getting the shot and thinking about that later. So yeah, very cool what you can get when you are doing that. So, all right, so we're almost done here, but I do want to mention these computational technologies. I'm not sure how this GoToMeeting is going to do on the videos here, but we'll give it a shot here. But computational technology is something that the industry has wanted for a long time, and we've been doing it for a long time at Olympus or OM System. And so the technology's there, and the smaller sensor you can process faster. So you're seeing some of these features like a pro capture. You're seeing pre-capture, like let's say in a Nikon Z8 or Z9. It's similar technology, and now that the processing has gotten faster in the industry, we're seeing some of these features trickle into the larger sensor cameras, which is cool because that's a great feature. You basically capture something after it happens. You never miss the shot. It's pretty cool. And with ours, you shoot full resolution, 120 frame per second capture in RAW. So there is no handicapping of the way you shoot with that. AI detection autofocus, we were the first to do that, not with birds, but with planes, trains, and automobiles. But you could see how accurate the cameras are now, where you have that bird captured and then the other bird comes flying by and it grabs it, but stays focused on the one bird. Of course, high resolution shooting, where you take an image and you can get from our 20 meg sensor an 80 meg tripod shot or a 50 megapixel handheld high resolution shot. It's pretty neat. Focus stacking and bracketing in the cameras, which is kind of cool. We'll talk a little bit about that. And then live composite is neat. We have a couple of long exposure modes, and live composite is one of them, where you can sit back, have a drink, and watch your star trails appear on your screen, or you could do some light painting or what have you. Pretty neat stuff. And of course, for landscape, some cool things are like live ND, where you don't have your filters with you, but you could still get the effect of an ND filter or a graduated neutral density filter. Pretty cool. And we'll talk a little bit about those as we go. And then, of course, starry sky autofocus. The camera will autofocus on the stars. Pretty neat stuff. All right. Image stabilization, second to none in the industry. This is amazing, where we're up to 8.5 shutter speed stops with the right lens and the right camera. I mean, you can handhold a 600 millimeter equivalent at 7 stops. It's unbelievable. I mean, just what you can do with these cameras, holding them for a couple of seconds and getting images with, let's say, for instance, a live ND filter of a waterfall slowing down. It's really cool. And they're amazing. And one of the reasons it's such a great stabilization, and trust me, any stabilization in a camera is amazing for a photographer, but these are really exceptional. And one of the reasons is the smaller sensor. The bodies are similar in size now in your mirrorless cameras because of video and things like that. But the smaller sensor has a smaller mechanism, so it floats more in the camera. There's more room to move around in that camera body. So there's more range of motion, which allows for more powerful stabilization in the cameras. It's pretty cool. But again, any stabilization is amazing. They're all really good now. This is just a step ahead because of that. All right, so as far as recommended gear, here's the cool thing about landscape photography. Any camera. I mean, in my lineup, you have the Tough TG7. That's our point and shoot. That's waterproof. That's got a 25 to 100 equivalent lens. My entry level is an EM10 Mark IV, which is non-weatherproof, but nice little entry level interchangeable lens camera. They're all 20 meg from the EM10 up. OM5 Mark II is my mid-range. OM3 is my sort of in between the 5 and the 1, which is my flagship, the 1. The 3 is sort of leaning more towards the 1. It's a high-end camera that's sort of a nice looking, I call it a jackknife of all cameras. It's like us stepping a little outside of nature and getting into some street photography or streetscape. It's a great travel camera. Great camera to take with you and have a powerhouse of a flagship in a smaller compact camera. So any of these cameras will work for landscape, and that's the cool thing. Really, this is where the camera that inspires you is the camera that you want to take. The nice thing about the interchangeable, of course, is you can change your lenses and you could change your viewpoint or what you're looking at. So let's take a look at that. So some of my favorite lenses for landscape range, and of course we'll look at some standard or wide angle, and some of the ones that I love in our lineup are the 12 to 40. Now if you're shooting a full frame camera, I'll give you the equivalent. So you're looking at a 24 to 80 2.8, and it is a 2.8. I will say, regardless of what internet says, your light does not change on your format. So a 2.8, there's no format on a light meter. So your 1.2 is a 1.2 is a 1.2. Your depth of field's a little different, but your light is the same. So that's a 12 to 40 or 24 to 80. 7 to 14 is my ultra wide angle, so a 14 to 28 equivalent. And my 8 to 25 f4 Pro, I love that lens. That's one of my favorite landscape lenses. Now you can put a 72 millimeter filter on that lens with no adapters, so that's a pretty cool lens. The reason the 7 to 14 is really nice is the 2.8 you can do night photography. So it just depends on, I'm not much of a night shooter, so 8 to 25 f4 is fine for me. And then there's the 40 to 150 2.8, which is just a fantastic great small sharp lens, great for everything from portrait to sports to landscape. Just a great little lens. And we have our new 50 to 200 2.8 image stabilized, which is unbelievable. It's a really nice lens. You got heat resistant coating. You got stabilization that syncs with the body. Our newest coatings, 02 coatings, so great for flare and glare and color contrast. Just an amazing lens. And of course, the 300 millimeter f4 Pro is one of my favorites. And you wouldn't think that you'd use that for landscape at a 600 millimeter equivalent, but that image right there is with that lens. So you never know when you're out there, what you're trying to convey. Sometimes you want to use a long lens, and that's a long prime. So that's something you can use out there. Now, smaller lenses, compact primes are great, and I love these for shooting landscape as well. So on the OM line, you have the 12 millimeter f2. That's a fantastic lens for night sky and for landscape. The 20 millimeter 1.4, it's another one, so you'd be a 40 equivalent. 17 1.8. The 2 is great because it's weather sealed. Same thing with a 25 1.8. And then I always throw my macros in there because I love throwing a macro lens in a bag and having that with me just for specifics. Now, one of the cool things about 4/3 with macro is that my zooms have telemacro. For instance, that 300 millimeter f4, you have about a 4-foot telemacro, which is fantastic for shooting butterflies and grasshoppers and what have you, while you're shooting everything else. But most of your lenses here will act like a pseudo macro. You can get pretty close with a lot of your 4/3 lenses, but those true macros are fantastic. Really fantastic. So let's talk about accessories. I hope I'm not going too quick there. I'll slow it down a little bit now. But these are some things that can help make or break your shot. And this is sort of like what my kit would be if I was going to go out today and shoot landscape. So I would take a couple of cameras with me. Usually I'll put a different lens on each one. Like I said, I like to carry a macro. So I'll have a 90 macro. I'll throw the 12 to 100 in there. So instead of the 12 millimeter f2, the 12 to 100 is a lens I didn't mention. It is an awesome lens. If you were to buy my OM1 Mark II, my flagship camera, and you were to say to me, I just want one lens to do a little bit of everything, landscape and travel, and the 12 to 100 f4 Pro. It is sharp from 12 to 100. It's one of the sharpest, if not the sharpest all-in-one in the industry. It's amazing. And it's with the stabilization that syncs with the body. You can hand hold that thing for seconds. It's really amazing. 8-25, like I said, I love that lens. And I usually carry the OM3 now with me because it's such a great little camera. Without a grip and without a lens, it's like a brick. You just throw it right in your bag. It takes up no space. I always carry a little multi-tool with me. Usually filters, even though there's some built into the cameras with the computational, I'll bring at least a polarizer like you see here. A remote release. I like a traditional remote release with a cable. If I'm using a tripod or something like that. I don't use a tripod a lot, but with landscape, it's one of those categories where I do usually have one in the car, or if I deliberately want to shoot certain things where I might need it, I'll bring it. So it just depends on what I'm shooting, because most of the stuff I shoot, you can get away without it. But there are times where you might want a really long exposure, and that's where that tripod comes in. That new 50 to 200 is becoming one of my favorite lenses, so I do start to carry that with me now. I've had it for a couple of months, and it's just a great all-around lens for a little bit of everything, so that's becoming a favorite. It's a 100 to 400 equivalent, by the way, and you could put a 2x converter on there and get 800 at 5.6, so it's a really, really versatile lens. Now, one of the cool things about the system is the app, the image share app. And like other companies, they probably have similar stuff where you can, use a remote on the camera. So you can use this a couple of different ways. Like I said, I like a wired remote, but when I don't have one, the app works great. I mean, it creates its own network, whether Bluetooth or Wi-Fi. You can set it up like I have it shown here, where it's just like a normal remote. You can lock it, you can press it halfway, you can press it to shoot, or you can set it up live where the camera becomes a dummy and you see everything on the phone and you're able to shoot that way. Now, why would you do that? There's a few things. I mean, maybe you're away from the camera and you want to use it as a remote that's a little bit further away. I had a gentleman in Indiana that was shooting for a client, and it was something with I want to say it was Christmas trees possibly, and there was a covered bridge, and he was lighting it with the LiveCom feature. He was lighting up the trees and the bridge, and he used his iPad to see what he was doing while the camera was about 20 feet away and looking at the scene. So there's different ways to utilize this that work really well. But the app does work well, and it is another option for accessories. All right, so this is the nuts and bolts of the presentation. This is my 15 photography tips for landscape, and some of these are very basic. If you guys are landscape shooters, you may know all these probably. They're very basic, but again, there's things that we forget sometimes, something you may not think about. So hopefully, I'll get you to learn something here. Just to give you a little background, you guys, on me with landscape. So I have a friend back home in upstate New York. I'm in Northeast Ohio now, and my friend Todd's a little younger than me. He taught himself landscape, and I used to go out with him a lot. And I love his images, and I could never understand how he saw what he saw, how he could get these images. They're beautiful, and so I always struggled with that. And I took the job with Olympus in the Midwest and had a territory that was just a big driving territory. And I'd gotten divorced right when I took the job. So I had a lot of time to reflect and think, and I'm driving and listening to podcasts, and I started to do some landscape. I started to pull over, take some shots, go hiking a little more, and get out there and really think about it. And this is where I kind of started that whole journey with landscape. So I haven't been shooting landscape for a long time. It's only been a few years. I really got into birding a lot more, or bird photography, I should say. And but I really enjoy landscape, and I have a long way to go. But I've learned a lot, and so some of these will be very elementary, but they're very important. And so, for instance, tip number one. This is Letchworth State Park, by the way, in Western New York State. But learn photography basics. Um, Learn the exposure triangle, the rules of photography, for instance, the rule of thirds. Learn about your lens choices and how to see, and that's going to be another tip as well. So it's very important to decide what you're looking at. We see at about what they say is 50 millimeters. So in 4/3, that would be 25, right? And that's your normal quote unquote range of what they say we see. So the human eye. So if you want to, zoom in on that, or you want to step back and zoom out, it depends on what you're trying to convey in that image. The exposure triangle is super important. And I think a lot of us jump into photography now and we just learn. Mirrorless cameras, what you see is what you get, sort of. So you can put it in manual and just start playing. But there's nothing like knowing the basics of your shutter speed, aperture, and ISO. Everything's about light in our industry. I know we want to shoot in the lower and lower and lower and lower light, and all this stuff, or more and more and more megapixels or more. But none of that matters unless you know how to really control the light coming into your camera. That's really the main thing. And that's what separates the pros from the amateurs, is really understanding how that light's affecting your image. Just as a side note, Zuiko, the lenses from OM, Zuiko stands for, one of the things it stands for is Light of the Gods, which I thought was interesting. It's kind of a cool little note. But when Olympus created the first camera that they had, it was 1932 or 36, and it was called the Semi-Olympus. And believe it or not, they created the lens before the camera, and it was considered the soul of the camera. So I always kind of like that history, because it's true that the light is really what we do. We paint with light. So this is a cool little boathouse in the Adirondacks. I love this little guy. But what I wanted to show here was to learn everything you can about your camera. It kind of goes hand in hand with learning the basics, but the cameras are tools, right? They're just computers now. They're not what we used to have with film. And so the more you know the camera, the more it becomes an extension of your own hand. And when you can bring that camera up and just change your settings without even thinking about it, that's when the photography becomes fun. That's when you can really kind of capture what you're trying to capture, the essence of your photo, by not thinking about it. So really, really get to know your camera. I know, we're pushed a lot to get a new camera or a different camera, but take one of those cameras, buy some new lenses, play with that camera, get to know it really well. It's very important to know your menu, know how to get out of your menu, right? And just work with the camera or the function buttons. This shot here was with the 300 millimeter f4, that 600 equivalent. And just to give you an idea of how different a focal length can work, This was shot with the 12 to 100 the same day. So that's the same image, just that I was so close with that 600 millimeter equivalent that you're getting rid of the water that's moving a little bit. You're getting more of that calm water, that nice reflection. But this is what it looked like, at about a 200 millimeter versus a 600 millimeter. So kind of interesting how different the view can look when you use a different focal length. And here's another one here that I just added this year. Same place, but this is with the 50 to 200 at 200. So it'd be a 400 millimeter equivalent. But you can see different time of the day, different year, but same old place. I love that place. I go back to a lot of the same places. And that's a great thing to do sometimes, and we'll talk about that. All right, number 3, I got to book a little bit here. So this is Rocky Mountain National Park, and of course you can take this with your phone or a 90-year-old camera and get the same shot. There's no bad shot here. It's amazing over there. This is with the 12 to 100. This is a few years ago. But number 3 is to maximize the use of your depth of field. So know what aperture you're using. Do you want to keep the overall image in focus throughout the scene? So maybe you use an aperture of f8 to f16. Or do you want to focus on an object in front of you, like say a rock or a small tree, and keep the rest out of focus? So maybe you use a more open aperture, like a 2.8 to 4. Or maybe you want all of that in focus. Maybe you have a waterfall and you have a rock in the foreground, can't get it all in focus, so you use what's called focus stacking or focus bracketing, where you focus on different parts of the scene and then put them together in software after. So kind of maximize that use of that. Know what you're getting out of that. Don't just take a shot of the scene. Take a shot and think about it. Do I want everything in focus or just a little bit in focus? Number 4 is to use a tripod when needed. And I think I mentioned this already, which there are situations where a tripod is needed, and I always say to turn off the stabilizer if you remember when using a tripod on the cameras. And that's because as a manufacturer, we always say that in our manual. But to be honest, most of my ambassadors will tell you don't worry about it. And actually, as a shooter, I'd probably tell you not to worry about it. I've only had maybe one instance where I had an image that was out of focus, leaving the stabilizer on. And I think it might have been user error. So the stabilizers are really good now. And the reason why they tell you to turn it off, if you remember, is because if that tripod is stable like it's supposed to be, that mechanism theoretically is still looking for movements. There's a chance you can get an out of focus image, but for the most part, I've never had an issue, knock on wood. And I think most of you, like me, have probably always just not even thought about it or forgot about it. So it's there. Live ND mode on this shot. So this was using the live neutral density mode, and you can see where that water has that effect of an ND filter, where it slows that down and give you that milky look there. All right, number 5. This is in Mentor, Ohio, on the water there on Lake Erie. This is a cool little lighthouse there. But look for a more interesting angle or view of the scene. And this kind of goes hand in hand with going back. Going back to a place a couple of different times of the year, even at different times of the day. But sometimes the most interesting view could be actually behind you, or maybe, maybe with the light falling at a different angle. So make sure you take a step back, enjoy the surroundings, and then capture. Now, here's an image from a little further away of the same lighthouse. You can see how different that looks. And I go back here all the time, and here's an image with a 20 millimeter 1.4, completely different time of year with that lighthouse. So much more mean sort of look, right? With the lake coming in nice and rough. And this is around probably November of the year. So a little more towards winter, and you have, just that really nasty looking sky. It's kind of a cool image. That's a 20 millimeter 1.4, so a 40 millimeter equivalent. And again, sometimes a subject can look a lot cooler when you revisit it. Number 6 is to capture movement in a scene, and that's always fun. So look for moving clouds, moving water. Do you want to maybe convey that in the image? It gives it kind of a cool little look. Live ND is really neat. So is live composite. You can use that as well. And that's one of our long exposure modes, like I said. But live ND really works neat. It's I have a slide on it after, but it's really cool how it uses computational photography. It uses multiple exposure to take the moving areas of a scene and mimic the effect of ND. Pretty cool. This is one of my favorite places. This is Seventh Lake up in the Adirondacks in New York State. And this is the 12 to 100. I just love that lens. Is that 12 millimeters? So it'd be a 24 millimeter equivalent. And this is in high resolution mode. You're not going to be able to tell on the screen here. But again, that's a 50 megapixel handheld for me. I kneel down, get low to the ground, and take that image. And it's pretty cool. Now, if I was to go back a different time of year or a different time of the day, um, by the way, the tip here is to look for reflections in the scene. When you're shooting water, always get reflections. Whether you have a puddle, water, you might have a piece of glass in front of you. It's always cool to get some reflections, and they can really enhance that landscape, especially when you're looking at things like the fall foliage, right? But going back to a place, you can see the clouds in the back here, or the mist. Again, different time of the morning, a little bit lower to the deck, so changing that vantage point a little bit. And then, of course, different time of year, or a different year, I should say, so different look. But going back is always cool. I don't mean to go so fast. I want to make sure I get through these for you guys. So number 8 is to utilize the rule of thirds. I talked about the rules of photography in the beginning, and the cool thing about the rules is you can break them after. But rule of thirds is really important with landscape photography. So this is where your image is divided into thirds. Like this. Now, you may be able to do this on your cameras. There's a way to put a grid up, usually on our cameras, where you can see this when you're shooting. But after a while, you start to not need that. You start to kind of just do it naturally because you're used to kind of shooting this way. And what it does is breaks up everything in thirds, where you have, in this case, that driftwood sort of just, that leads the viewer into the scene, and the water, the horizon line is not quite in the middle. It's sort of up towards that top third of the picture. So it kind of creates a more, just a better balanced image than if everything was right in the center. So and find an interesting subject. I think this barn has been taken down now in Ohio, but I thought it was a cool barn to shoot middle of the day, which is always crazy. But find an interesting subject to photograph. Maybe it's an object or an area that calls to you. Maybe you have a barn near you, and it's a great way to practice. Go different times of the year. Maybe there's a cool tree out in a field, a lone tree. And you get different times of year, the fall, the winter, depending on where you live, different storms, no storms, blue sky, gray sky. And practice on it. You might get some really neat stuff with that. And it's a great way, again, to practice and just see how different it can be when you revisit places. Number 10 is using leading lines, and leading lines are super important. Very basic. This is a very basic shot, but leading lines are horizontal, vertical, or diagonal lines, and they attract a viewer's attention and sort of bring the eye right into that critical area of the scene. So here it's the center where you're looking at that little waterfall, and it's a great tool to show more depth in your landscapes and draw that viewer into the scene. This is shot with the 7-14. So nice and wide, getting really low with the tripod on this one. And this is a few years ago. Believe it or not, this is Turkey Run State Park in Indiana. You're in the middle of Indiana. It's all farmland, flat. And there's this state park where the glacier sort of ended and you just drop right down. Temperature drops. Got some really cool little caverns. Pretty neat stuff. So number 11 is to try and add people to your landscape. This one, again, it's my daughter years ago with 7-14. So really wide angle. So you definitely distort people. But I try to put her in the center where she's not as distorted. And this is Green Lakes State Park outside of Syracuse, New York. And there's these 2 lakes there that are prehistoric, and they're pretty much just crystal clear. Really neat. But sometimes when you add people, it just gives it a different type of view. And this is another shot, more of a senior portrait almost, but this is a potato field where that was her grandfather's field. And yeah, kind of cool. So this is my kids in Hocking Hills State Park in Ohio with the 12-100. So, again, adding sort of like the man with nature, man-made objects. Kind of cool what you can do there. And this is my dad at that deck that I love. Every year we try to shoot those fall colors. So again, revisiting the place I was at and then just adding a person in there. And I don't know if you consider this a landscape, but add yourself to the landscape sometimes. We go and take landscape shots, and sometimes we don't think about ourselves, as a younger person, and I don't know why I have that extra little thing down there, but this is with the 12-100, and I put it twice. But I don't know if you'd consider this a landscape. I was shooting over my shoulder trying to get lightning. It didn't work. I was in Texas, and but this is more typical of doing, myself in a landscape. And this is with a 7-14 actually, so that OM12 with a 12-100 shouldn't be there. But it's something where you can look back and go, oh yeah, this was outside of Las Vegas, and I remember doing that. It was 10 years ago, and look, I have no gray. So sometimes just throw yourself in there, put the camera on a timer or use a remote, take a shot, and you never know. It's kind of cool to get a shot of yourself at the moment, and then later on you look back and you go, it's kind of neat that I actually threw myself in there. So don't be afraid to do that. I know as photographers, sometimes we don't like to do that. Almost there. Number 13, change your vantage point. So this shot right here was just when COVID was, quote, ending, and everybody went to the beach to go shoot. And I walk out there, and there I swear there was probably 30 photographers photographing engagements and weddings, engagement photos and senior photos and weddings and everything. And so I went on this little path here and I ducked down, got really low, like dog's eye view, right? And so this changed the scene completely. It was the golden hour. It was kind of cool, this little like seagrass. But if I stood up, you'd see a bunch of people all around. Matter of fact, that lighthouse that I shot earlier is kind of far out. You can almost see it on the horizon. But this is something I see with people a lot when they first get a tripod, as an example. We'll go to shoot like a sunset, let's say, and the first thing they do is they put the legs down so it's at their height, right? Because we're always standing there taking an image. Think about getting lower or getting higher, especially with a tripod. You have this chance of lowering that camera down, using that flip screen, and really getting a shot that's different. So this is something that you could think about, is changing that vantage point. And this one here is kind of interesting, but just wait. Sometimes you're taking an image, and if you just wait a little bit, you can get a whole different scene, or think about a different scene, use a different focal length. So this was a 12-100, and there are some pelicans flying by. This is in Pine Island, Florida, and it was fiery sky, kind of burned out as far as the sunset, but there was this guy kayaking a little further out, and he was coming in pretty quick. So I had the 7-14 on a tripod next to me while I was shooting with that 12-100. So you can see where it's fiery orange out there where I shot that pelican, but this guy coming in, he was actually almost where I could touch him, but that 7-14 really throws him out there with that wide angle and just changes the scene completely. It's another high resolution photo. This is of in Muskegon, Michigan, Pier Marquette Beach. But number 15, that last tip is to research the area. It's really important, especially as we get older. Learn the area you're going to shoot. What are the best times to shoot there? Where's the sun going to be? We have apps now like photo pills and things like that can kind of show you where things are going to be, what angle to shoot at, what f-stop to use. But let somebody know you're heading out. Let someone know. We don't think about it sometimes. It's crazy what can happen. I actually had a high school friend recently fall off of a mountain hiking. A really avid hiker, and she passed away a couple of months ago. You don't know, so let somebody know that you're going out. Let somebody. We have Facebook. We have all kinds of social media. Hey, I'm going to be hiking at such and such place. Should something happen, you fall and break an ankle, God forbid, somebody knows where to look for you. You never know. So let somebody know where you're going. If you're going alone, especially, learn the area. What are the best times to shoot? And go ahead and take that shot. All right, guys. So we have a few more minutes, and I want to give you just a couple little extras here. And I'm going to try and go quick because there's a bunch of them. I probably won't get them all in, but I want to get as many as I can. So here's some features here. So one thing is filters. I want to talk about it really quick. You're definitely going to want to use filters for certain things, even though the cameras have built-in live ND on my cameras or live graduated ND. It's still great to have some filters, and ND filters are probably one of the first you'll buy, and also a polarizer. A polarizer filter gives you that less glare, a little less reflection, helps you to see through things, helps you to really brighten that color up in the fall, things like that. So those are probably what you're going to buy first, would be a polarizer. A neutral density filter is a dark filter like you see here in this image. So it's going to cut that light coming in your camera. So shooting a waterfall and getting that effect of the water moving slow is just basically having a longer shutter speed. But as the day goes and it gets brighter, you have to cut that light coming in the camera so that you're able to do that. So a darker filter like that will allow you to. You can actually use these in conjunction with our filters, and it would work great. Art filters. Everybody made fun of Olympus when they did these back in the day, and then Instagram came out a year later. But these are kind of fun. They're JPEG only, but they're kind of cool. And you can add them in the camera in JPEG, or you can add them later on in the app, or you can add them on Workspace, which is it's our software, our free software. And it works really well. So there's some really cool filters there. And as an example, this is a shot of Racket Lake up in the Adirondacks. And it was a boring fall day, just really kind of gloomy. And I added a pop art filter, and it just gives you kind of a nice little cool pop of color. And I added it in Workspace, which is that software. So a lot of cool things you can do there. These are old, but I think they hold true. So they weren't shot by me. It just kind of shows the filter. This is no filters, kind of a cool image here. And this is adding a neutral density and a longer exposure. You get a lot more detail, opens up them shadows, but then you do the same thing and also add a dramatic tone filter. Kind of cool. So don't discount those filters. We talked about Live ND, so I won't spend a lot of time here, but it is a really cool feature in the cameras for OM. It's in the OM5, the OM3, and the OM1, where you can actually we're up to ND 128 now in the OM1 and the OM3, where you can have lenses like a 7 to 14 or 8 millimeter and still be able to get neutral density. And this is some examples of using that, and it works really, really well. So that's really cool. Live graduated neutral density is something new we've had in the last couple of years. This is really cool. So kind of like having a gradient in your camera. You're doing the sunset or what have you. You want to bring it down over the horizon, open up your shutter speed to get more detail out of the foreground, and you can do that. And it's really neat how that works, and gives you that really nice color you can bring out. So live graduated neutral density is really cool. And this is an example of that when we first got the OM1 2, and I was able to use that. This is on Lake Michigan. It's really cool to use that. All right, really, really quick. Got a couple more minutes. So when you're focusing for landscape, try to use single point. You don't want to use multi-point, and you don't always want to focus in the center. You want to maybe go down a little bit and go a third in to give you everything in pretty much in focus there, especially with your aperture at about an f8 or f11. Using multi-point is something you don't want to do. That's more for sports or like shooting birds, things like that, moving subjects. If you use multi-point, what happens is, you end up grabbing maybe a branch you don't want or something like that, but you're not getting what you really want in focus. Another thing you can do is use manual focus and use an assist like peaking. Focus peaking is on the cameras now. Pretty much all of our cameras, all manufacturers have this. This is showing red. Whatever highlights in red as you're manually focusing is in focus. And you also have a magnify capability where you can magnify the image. I talked about focus stacking and bracketing, where you can, multiple, you can focus on different areas of the scene and bring it in. The only difference in stacking and bracketing is stacking is where the camera does it for you in camera. Takes up to 15 images, gives you a stacked image at the end. It's a JPEG because it does all kinds of processing, but you still have your RAWs leading up to it. Bracketing, you can do up to 999 images, and it's pretty cool. It can get a lot of things in focus for you. And I talked about the high res mode. You've got handheld and tripod. Tripod will give you an 80 megapixel shot. It overlays a half a pixel and takes the image. You don't want somebody waving, but you can do water and stuff, and it'll blend it. And handheld will give you actually a 25 megapixel image. And it's pretty cool. This is an example of a 25 megapixel handheld that I shot. And if you notice, the water has the ND effect. I shot that at about a 20th of a second. So it actually blends the water together in the high res mode and gives you that effect. Pretty cool stuff. All right, I did it, and I thank you guys for joining. And if we have any questions there, we can go ahead and open that up.
Oh, Mike, thank you. That was
Perfect.
fantastic. And your images were so beautiful. I'm actually in
Thank you.
Ohio as well. So
How
to
are you?
see all of those photos that were near here was actually quite inspiring.
Nice.
Since I was out in Colorado for so long. So thanks for that.
Yep.
Everybody, if you have questions for Mike in your control panel, you can go ahead and put those in, and I will pass them along to Mike here live. So let's see what else we have.
Want me to stop sharing there, Brooke?
No, you can keep your screen up. No, you can keep the end there.
All right.
Yeah, so far we have one question. We have quite a little bit of a quiet audience, so everyone feel free to put the whatever your questions are in. So we do have a viewer here who has the TG7
Yep.
and was curious for scuba diving if future models will increase the depth at which you can use the camera without an outside body.
Yeah, as far as I know, I don't know. So as far as I know, no, because I don't know. That doesn't mean they won't do that. I know right now you're at the 50 foot, 200 with a housing. I know I've seen how they test those cameras, and it is fantastic. And to be honest, I'm sure they could probably go a little deeper, but that's the rating they give it is 50, just to be safe. But they really put them through a lot. So I can definitely pass that on and see if it's something they're going to look at. But to be honest, I really don't know, what they're doing in the future with that. But yeah, right now we're at 50.
At least you know we have somebody who's definitely trying to push the camera to
Yeah.
its limits. So
Yeah. It's a cool camera, really cool camera.
Great. For Northern Lights, what kind of lens would you recommend? A lot of them were at the
Yeah.
f2.8. Is that lens okay for Northern Lights, or is
Sure.
there a lower one that would be better?
Yeah. I would go 2 point. And I haven't, just to let you know, Ann, I haven't shot any Northern Lights, but I know how to shoot them. I would definitely 2.8 or brighter. So you also have 1.2s. You have the 2.0, like the 12 millimeter, the 1.8s. Now you can also use the Panasonic lenses on our 4/3 cameras because it's 4/3. There's Laowa, there's Panasonic, there's other manufacturers, but in the pro end, some of the features don't play nice anymore. So 90% of everything works. It's just a matter of if you're doing things like focus stacking or shooting birds at a certain speed, you're not going to get certain things. But depending on what you're shooting, they all work. So I would say it really depends on the focal length you want to use to get the view you want first. Do you want a wide angle shot of the Northern Lights, or do you want something a little more narrow? If you were to go more narrow, like my 17 1.2 is a 35 equivalent, that's a fantastic lens. The 21.4, I wouldn't personally go more narrow than that, but some people do. Some people shoot the 40 to 150, 2.8. Um, but if you want to go wide, that 12 millimeter f2 is really cool. That's a great lens for that. 7 to 14 2.8 is a great lens if you want to go really wide. And then from there, you just set your camera up as bright as it'll go, maybe 1600 ISO and a few seconds, right? Let it go, and you'll see them.
We just got another Northern Lights question, which is perfect timing.
Sure.
What is the operating temp for the OM1 if somebody wants to be in extreme temperatures like that?
Oof. OM1 is, I almost have to look it up now. I'm trying to think. I want to say it's minus 14 is the low, and I could be wrong on that. I don't have it in front of me, but it is on our website. If you check our website at explore.omsystem.com, you can check that for sure. It will say it in the specs, the high and the low for what it'll do, but I think it's in that range.
Great, thank you.
Sure, sure.
Next, for wildlife and travel, which
Mhm.
obviously this is what we do here,
Sure.
can you compare the 50 to 100 versus the 100 to 400 lens?
Yeah, 40 to 150, right? 40 to 150 is
Yeah,
what.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So everybody's trying to compare those. So so the so the 40, wait, 100 to 4. Oh, you're talking 100 to 400. Okay, I'm sorry. 50 to 100 versus the 100 to 400. Uh, yeah, it's gonna. Okay, so you could put a 2x converter on the 50 to 100 and get that 800 equivalent of the 100 to 400, right? Because 100 to 400 would be a 200 to 800 equivalent. But you can also put a 2x converter on that, and you're at 1600 equivalent. Um, so the comparison is going to be more in the image quality. You're going to get a better image quality out of that 50 to 100. It's just our top quality lenses. It's our top quality um, product. I mean, everything from the heat resistant coating. It's just the newer 02 coatings. It's just a fantastic lens. Now, the 100 to 400, if you're going to use that, the Mark II, in my opinion, is the way to go. They put the fluorine coating on it. It's got the sync stabilization, and it's a fantastic lens. It's my best-selling lens for the bird shows is that 100 to 400 Mark II with an OM1. It's just a great lens. So I think the 50 to 100 is just more versatile. It's I mean, again, you're looking at a top quality pro lens versus what we call a premium lens. So your image quality is going to be a little sharper on the 50 to 100, but the 100 to 400 is great. And especially for the price, and it's still weather resistant. And, it's IPX1 versus IP53. I mean, you're just going to have more on the 50 to 100, right? But 50 to 100 is more versatile. So that's the main thing. Like I can shoot anything from portraits to landscape to birds, So yeah, I hope that helps.
Yeah, no, thank you. That was great.
Yeah.
Could we return to polarizer filters?
Yeah.
Can
Sure.
someone leave that on all day, or should they take it off and only use it in certain situations? And if so, what are the best times and ways to use a polarizer?
Yeah, so for me, I use a polarizer in the fall. I really do. I use it when there's especially when things are wet and there's color. That's mostly when I use a polarizer. Is just those times. There's people that probably use them a lot more. I say it's your first filter because that's usually the first one everybody grabs. But it really is for things like, like glare and that saturation. If you want to saturate things more, you're not going to really use it at night, but you can use it during the day. So it's not going to stay on there all the time, but it's something you will use. And so that would be, in my opinion, your first filter that I would go with is definitely what's called a circular polarizer. You can actually turn it and spin it, and you'll see the change in the camera. It's like polarizing sunglasses, kind of the same thing when you put them sunglasses on, how it changes everything during the day.
Right. Yeah,
Hope that
polarizer
helps.
was absolutely necessary when I went to the Galapagos. That's for
Yep.
sure.
Yeah, with
Yeah.
that bright sun and it cuts some of the light, it helps you out. Yep. With the way the water is and everything, sure.
Do you have any tips for capturing misty mountain ranges in like Canada or Smoky Mountains?
Um, for that, that's a good question. So, I mean, I was shooting some mist the other day at a local beaver marsh. And for me, it was really just stopping down a little bit. I really wanted to show some of the grit in a sense of it. So I stopped down a lot. I was at probably like F8. And I was kind of underexposing a little bit just to kind of show some of that mist. And and really for me, some of it was editing as well. It was really bringing in some of the areas that were brighter after and showing where some of that mist was and everything. But I would say just to, use your camera. I mean, use the ability to use a mirrorless, and what you see is what you get. I think that's where it really comes into play with something like that, where you really want to capture, that mist and how it looks on the mountain. Look at it in the screen and just go with what you're trying to, this makes sense, what you're trying to convey, right? So use that screen, use your exposure compensation, things like that, to really capture what you're looking to get. And I guess that's my best advice. It's is to just get nasty with it, show some
Nasty with it.
atmosphere with that. I go a little underexposed on that. I hope that helps.
Quote of the webinar.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, good. Next, what about condensation? Are there any
Mhm.
issues that we have with these cameras or lenses? And if so, what are
Sure.
the best way to protect both?
Yeah, I mean, you're going to get condensation. I mean, they're weatherproof, but that doesn't mean you're not going to see something even up under the viewfinder, especially when you're going to, like, say, the Galapagos, and you're going from an air conditioned place to a non-air conditioned place, things like that. So like anything else, just microfiber, what have you. What I do is you can use like anything from like Ziploc bags are really good, like large Ziploc bags, stuff like that, to really kind of keep your stuff sort of more with the same atmosphere. It sort of slows it down, so you're not going right from cold to hot or hot to cold. You're sort of slowly, going into that atmosphere. That's probably my best advice, because otherwise you're going to have, condensation and stuff until you get to temperature. So you once you do it like abruptly, you're going to see that. So you kind of want to slow that down. So usually I'll use like Ziploc bags, if that makes sense.
Yeah, perfect. No, that's great. Thank
Sure.
you for that.
Yeah.
Um, what about DMF focusing? Is that something that either you use or that's a feature of OM system or?
DNF focusing. What is DMF
I had
focusing?
to look it up. I'm not gonna lie, because I don't have
Yep,
Sony,
yep, yep,
but it is direct
yep.
manual focus.
Okay, okay. So direct manual. So that's a Sony thing. Okay, so I don't know the acronym there. So probably I'm trying to think of what that would be. I use focus peaking, like I was showing in that presentation, where I'll use like red usually, where I'll manually focus, and whatever highlights in red is in focus. Now I'll also use in the camera, I'll turn on autofocus plus manual focus. And sometimes when I autofocus, I'll also grab the front ring and just kind of manually focus. So as I'm focusing, I can touch it up to make sure that everything's highlighted and I know that it's in focus. I'm thinking that's probably similar. So, and I would say, Patricia, like honestly, with landscape, especially, whatever you're comfortable with, that's always. And honestly, I say that with birds too. Like whatever you're comfortable with is usually the best way to do it. Um, because if as long as you're getting that focus, you know what I mean. Um, because anything somebody else does may or may not work for you. You want to incorporate that stuff, but definitely use what works for you, and then incorporate other things to kind of play with it, see how it works, and then you can use that stuff if it works. But everybody has their way of doing it. But yeah, definitely, it sounds like that would be a great way to focus for landscape.
Great, thanks for that explanation.
Sure, sure.
Um, Next, could we go back to the math of these cameras? Since you were referring to
Sure.
it's like translating a lot of lenses and a lot
Yeah.
of just could you maybe go back and step back a little bit? What exactly are the focal lengths and all that kind of stuff for the OM system, just to help us understand the math again?
Yeah, it's easy. Like all the articles from 10 years ago always use 4/3 because it's 2 times. So since the film days, we've always used 35 millimeter as the sort of the standard. And so when it came to digital, especially, there's so many formats, right? 1 inch sensors and APS-C sensors and micro four third sensors and medium format sensors. So everything equates to 35 millimeter, or what the industry coined full frame. And so for mine, oops, sorry. For mine, that is 2 times. So if I have like a 12 millimeter lens, you're going to see what a 24 millimeter. It's going to be similar to what a 24 millimeter would be on a 35 or a full frame camera, if that makes sense. So conversely, a 300 millimeter, you'd see what a 600 millimeter would see. And that's where my system gets really fun, because then it gets really small and lightweight. Does that help?
Amazing, thanks for that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
The
yeah,
confuse
absolutely.
the
And I'm
com-
sure
the
there's more resources
confusing
online.
the confusing part is the light, because there's a lot of things online that are good and bad, and there's a lot of mathematical stuff that goes around that isn't really correct in a sense, because the math doesn't math with photography sometimes. And so that's where it does get confusing. And that would be like, for instance, a lot of people will say, well, now you have to double the depth of field. So if you have a 1.2 lens, it's actually a 2.4. Well, yes and no. That's not quite true. My 1.2 lens is actually a soft focus lens. It's probably more like a 1.8, or 2.0. The math doesn't really math sometimes. You've got a greater depth of field. Yes, you're not for instance, a 12 millimeter, I'm getting a 24 field of view. But I am not a 24 millimeter, so my depth of field is going to be different, right? It's going to be deeper. But if you take my 300 millimeter f4 and it's a 600 millimeter focal equivalence, it's not really an f8 you're going to see, because you're compressing so much. It's more like a 5.6. So I don't agree with the just double the depth of field. That's not the way it works in photography. It just doesn't look like that. It's a deeper depth of field, but not quite double on a lot of the lenses. So I don't agree with that. The light is always going to be for that format. The lenses are designed for it. So 1.2 is 1.2 is 1.2. So if I was standing next to you and we were shooting portraits, and the person putting on let's say the demonstrator, tells us all to set our cameras at 400 ISO at 5.6, we're all going to set our cameras at 400 ISO at 5.6, no matter what format, and we're going to get the same exposure. So there's no format button on a light meter. So that's something to consider. But it's 2 times for the focal equivalence. Pretty easy.
Awesome. Thanks. Well,
Yeah,
we
yeah.
have reached the top of the hour. That
All
flew
right.
by, Mike. That was
Yeah,
so
it did.
information packed. I really enjoyed it. So I will turn it to you for any last closing comments.
Yeah, I just want to make mention again that if you guys do register for the NetApp excursions, you do get 10% off for OM system products. You'll get a code in your portal. And I want to thank everybody for joining, and I hope you guys leave with a couple of tips that you didn't think about, and hopefully you learned something about my cameras as well. And I really appreciate it. I appreciate everybody's time. I always do. Thank you very, very much.
Yes, Mike, and
Yeah,
we appreciate your time today and coming and giving us that great presentation. And we'd like to thank
absolutely.
everybody who tuned in. If you're interested in information on how you can travel with NetHab, give us a call at 800-543-8917 or send us an email at info@nethab.com. Our adventure specialists are more than happy to help you. Join us tomorrow for our next daily dose of nature. You can check out this week's lineup, including registration links on our website at nathab.com/webinars. We did record today's presentation, and the replay will be available on our website soon. With that, I will conclude the webinar. Goodbye, everybody.